Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take complex information, we break it down, and really try to deliver the most impactful insights directly to you. Today, we're plunging into a topic it's constantly making headlines and definitely hitting bottom lines. The evolving threat of ransomware and cyber attacks, especially on critical infrastructure. And this isn't just about the massive corporations you hear about. It's really about understanding how these threats work, why they're so dangerous, and maybe most importantly, what you can actually do to protect your digital world, whether that's for your business or even just for your own general awareness. We're talking about a pretty serious challenge here, but also about the powerful proactive strategies that are emerging to fight back. And speaking of powerful strategies, this deep dive is brought to you by Stonefly. They're a leader in enterprise storage, backup and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions. If you're looking for secure, genuinely ransomware-proof storage, then Stonefly sells air-gapped and immutable storage solutions. You can contact them at sales@stonefly.com to schedule a demo.
It really is a landscape that's constantly shifting. And what's fascinating, maybe alarming too, is just how quickly the attackers are becoming incredibly sophisticated. The material we've explored for today, it offers a really comprehensive look at how these threats operate, and maybe more importantly, how organizations, whether they're large or small, can build a formidable, a resilient defense. It's really about moving beyond just reacting after the fact. It's about truly anticipating what might come next.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. We hear the term ransomware thrown around a lot, sometimes in these hushed tones. But what exactly are we talking about, and why has it become such a pervasive, almost inescapable threat these days?
Right. So at its core, ransomware is basically a type of malicious software. It's designed to encrypt or, lock up the data on your computer, maybe even an entire network. It makes your files and the systems that rely on them completely unusable. Then the malicious actors, the criminals, they demand a ransom. Usually it's in cryptocurrency like Bitcoin in exchange for a decryption key to supposedly unlock your data. But what's particularly challenging and where things have really changed is how it's evolved. We're not just seeing simple encryption anymore. Attackers have shifted to far more destructive and impactful tactics. They've moved beyond just that single point of leverage.
So wait, it's not just about hoping you get your data back anymore. There's like another layer to it now.
Exactly. The game has changed significantly. I mean, originally, ransomware was mostly focused on encrypting a victim's data and then demanding payment for the key. It was straightforward in a way, though obviously devastating. But these actors, they've escalated their strategies dramatically. Now we're seeing what's commonly called double extortion. And with this tactic, the attackers don't just encrypt your data, they also steal, or exfiltrate as it's called, sensitive information from your systems before or sometimes during the encryption process.
Okay.
And then they use that stolen data as extra leverage. They pressure victims to pay by threatening to publicly release this sensitive info if the ransom isn't paid. So it adds this really powerful multi-layered pressure. Organizations now face not only the immediate operational disruption of locked systems, but also, the severe reputational damage, potential legal trouble, regulatory penalties, all the stuff that comes with a public data breach.
That's a huge added layer of fear for businesses, absolutely. But I think I've also heard about cases where they don't even bother encrypting, they just steal the data. Is that right?
You're absolutely right. Yeah, in some particularly insidious and evolving cases, these actors might actually skip the encryption step entirely. They rely solely on the data theft, the exfiltration, and the threat of making it public as their primary, sometimes their only, form of extortion. And this raises a really important question for any organization, maybe even for individuals with sensitive personal data. What's the real cost here, beyond just the operational downtime? It's not just about getting your systems back online anymore. It's profoundly about protecting your sensitive data from public exposure and all the cascading consequences that follow, which honestly can sometimes be even more damaging in the long run than the initial system lockout.
So breaking that down, what does this all mean for businesses, large and small, and maybe even for individuals who might just inadvertently get caught in the middle? What's the sort of tangible impact we're seeing?
Well, the impact is undeniably severe and really far-reaching. For businesses, these incidents can fundamentally cripple operations. Just imagine like a manufacturing plant where the production lines just halt because the control software is encrypted. Or maybe a hospital unable to access critical patient records.
Yeah, terrifying.
Yep. Exactly. And we're talking about significant economic repercussions. There's the substantial lost revenue from downtime, obviously. Then there's the immense cost of recovery, rebuilding affected systems, potential regulatory fines, especially now with stricter data privacy laws popping up everywhere. And beyond that, there's this lasting reputational damage that can profoundly erode customer trust, undermine stakeholder confidence, maybe even affect future business opportunities. And the recovery period itself, it's not quick, it's not easy, it's often challenging, incredibly costly, and frequently extends well beyond the initial disruption as organizations work to rebuild complex systems, restore huge amounts of data, and reestablish secure operations and trust. Importantly, this isn't a problem just for the big guys, the large corporations. It affects organizations of all sizes, from small and medium businesses right up to global enterprises. It really makes it a universal concern that demands proactive attention and, frankly, robust defense strategies.
Okay, so to bring this maybe somewhat abstract threat into the real world, we have a very recent and pretty stark example. The cyber attack on Nucor. They're the largest steel manufacturer in the U.S. This case study really brings home the stakes, doesn't it?
It really does. Nucor, I mean, they're a Fortune 500 company, the largest steel manufacturer in the U.S. and North America. They publicly disclosed just in mid-May 2025 that their servers had been penetrated. This unauthorized access to their IT systems, it was serious enough that it led them to proactively and temporarily halt certain production operations at various locations across the country. That was a precautionary measure, a containment step.
What?
Yeah. And the company confirmed this pretty significant cyber intrusion in 8K filing to the Securities and Exchange Commission. That really underscores the severity of the incident and its potential implications for critical infrastructure. Now, while Nucor initially remained sort of quiet about the specific nature of the attack, a later update did confirm that the hackers managed to exfiltrate, quote, limited data from the compromised systems, which lines up directly with that double extortion tactic we were just discussing, even if they didn't explicitly name ransomware in their filings.
That's fascinating. So let's talk about the why behind targeting a company like Nucor. Why is a steel manufacturer, which seems maybe kind of removed from typical personal data troves, why is it such an attractive target, whether it's for money or, maybe other objectives?
That's a really crucial question, and it gets to the strategic nature of some of these attacks. Nucor is much more than just a large company. It's a truly critical part of the U.S. infrastructure network. Steel is foundational, right? For construction, defense, transportation, countless other vital industries. So this makes a company like Nucor an obvious and frankly a high-value target for anyone looking to infiltrate crucial American systems. Whether their primary objective is financial gain through, say, traditional ransomware demands, or perhaps more strategically, to establish a disruptive foothold for potential future geopolitical events.
Right, so it's not always just about the money then. There could be this broader, maybe even geopolitical dimension to these kinds of attacks.
Precisely, yeah. If we connect this to the broader geopolitical picture, this incident lines up pretty well with warnings we've heard from intelligence agencies, cybersecurity conferences like RSA, about campaigns like Volt Typhoon. Retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery, for instance, he specifically warned about certain foreign operatives who seem keen on establishing these enduring footholds in American infrastructure. The strategic goal, he suggested, could be to enable disruption during some major geopolitical event. Imagine scenarios where suddenly ATMs stop working, or power becomes intermittent, or maybe water systems are compromised. That kind of disruption could create internal chaos here, distract citizens during a significant international crisis. It's a strategic play.
And, okay, stepping back from the geopolitics for a second, just on the purely financial side, why are manufacturers specifically such prime targets for extortion?
Well, beyond those potential nation-state interests, companies like Nucor are also prime targets for pure financial extortionists. And the reason is simple. Shutting down their production is incredibly costly. It creates these cascading negative effects throughout their really interconnected supply chains.
Right.
We saw this really starkly with a Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack back in 2021. That forced them to pay a $5 million ransom just to restore oil supplies to the U.S. East Coast. Remember the panic buying at gas stations?
Oh, yeah, vividly.
Their CEO later said he, quote, put the interests of the country first when making that difficult payment. And this isn't an isolated event in the industrial sector. In 2023, an estimated 70% of industrial ransomware attacks were specifically directed against manufacturers rather than, say, utilities. It just underscores their particular appeal to cybercriminals because of their valuable operational technology, their complex supply chains, and just the extremely high cost of any production downtime. Time is literally money, big money for them.
So what's the latest on Nucor's recovery? And maybe more importantly, what broader lessons can other companies, especially maybe other manufacturers, draw from their experience?
Nucor has provided an update. They stated that the affected systems have been restored, and they believe the threat actor has been successfully locked out of their systems. That's good news. Furthermore, they've taken steps to prevent future breaches, and importantly, they anticipate no material impact on their financial condition or overall results of operations.
Okay, that's a relatively positive outcome, all things considered.
It is. And this relatively swift and successful recovery, while it was undoubtedly a significant disruption at the time, it really underscores a vital point. Even industrial giants are vulnerable to sophisticated attacks, but a prompt, well-prepared, and effectively executed response is absolutely crucial for minimizing the impact and speeding up recovery. The Nucor incident really serves as a significant wake-up call, I think, particularly for mid-sized manufacturers. These companies often possess equally valuable data, they operate within highly interconnected supply chains, but they might also be operating with, let's say, underfunded or less robust IT security teams compared to their larger Fortune 500 counterparts.
Right, they might not have the same resources.
Exactly. So the attack highlights that company size offers no immunity from these threats. Instead, it really reinforces the universal necessity for robust cybersecurity measures across the entire manufacturing sector. Things like proactive steps, continuous vigilance, and the importance of leveraging expert cybersecurity guidance, and frankly, the right solutions.
So this brings us, I think, to the core question for anyone listening right now. How do organizations, and maybe by extension all of us, how do we move from just being reactive, cleaning up after attacks, to being truly proactive, to preventing them in the first place? It sounds like there's some incredibly detailed guidance available on this.
Yeah, this raises that really important question. How do we effectively build resilience into our digital operations? And you're right, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, along with its key partners like MS-ISAC, the NSA, and the FBI, they've laid out a really comprehensive set of best practices. It's truly a multifaceted approach. It addresses various stages of defense, and it absolutely starts with preparation. You have to lay the groundwork.
Okay, let's dive into that preparation then, because
Sure.
it really sounds like it's the bedrock. What's the absolute first thing, the most critical thing to focus on?
The absolute first, most critical thing is backups, backups, backups. I can't stress this enough. You absolutely must maintain offline encrypted backups of all your critical data. This is just non-negotiable. It's a fundamental principle. It is your absolute last line of defense against data loss from ransomware.
And offline is the key word there.
Offline is critical because many ransomware variants are specifically designed to actively seek out and then delete or encrypt any accessible online backups. They do this to make restoration impossible unless you pay the ransom. Think of it like storing a physical copy of your most important documents in a completely separate, locked, fireproof safe far away from your main office.
Got it.
And beyond just having them, you need to regularly test their availability and integrity. Run realistic disaster recovery scenarios to make sure they're actually usable and complete when you desperately need them most. You might even consider a multi-cloud solution to avoid vendor lock-in, just in case all your accounts under one vendor get hit. And some cloud vendors now offer immutable storage options that can automatically protect stored data without needing a separate environment. And this ties directly into needing secure, genuinely ransomware-proof storage solutions, like the air-gapped and immutable solutions offered by our sponsor, Stonefly. They really understand that your backups are your ultimate fallback. That's why their solutions are designed to make sure your data is always safe, isolated, and recoverable, even if the absolute worst happens.
Okay, so you've got those secure, tested offline backups. What's the next big piece of this preparation puzzle? What comes after backups?
All right, second, a well-defined and, importantly, regularly exercised incident response plan, IRP, is vital. Organizations need to create, maintain, and regularly practice a basic cyber incident response plan, and alongside that, an associated communications plan. This isn't just some static document gathering dust on a shelf. It needs to be a living plan that everyone involved understands and, crucially, can execute under extreme pressure.
Makes sense.
It has to include clear response and notification procedures, specifically for ransomware and data extortion incidents. This means knowing your internal notification procedures, adhering to applicable state laws about data breaches, and these vary quite a bit, and understanding federal notification requirements for sensitive information. And crucially, always have a hard copy and an offline digital version of this plan readily available, because if your primary network systems are down, guess what? You won't be able to access your plan if it's stored on the network.
Good point. Like having a fire escape plan, but you also need to practice the drill, right?
Exactly. Practice the drill.
And then there's this major shift in how we think about security itself, right? This concept of zero trust. Can you quickly define that for us? What does that mean in practice?
Yeah, third, a really critical philosophical and architectural shift is adopting what's called zero trust architecture, ZTA. This approach basically assumes that your network is already compromised or potentially hostile. It doesn't trust anything or anyone inside its perimeter just by default.
Okay, so assume breach from the start.
Pretty much. Think of it like a highly secure building where every single door, even inside corridors, requires a unique key card and maybe a fingerprint scan, even if you're already inside the building. It focuses on granular access control, making sure no one, whether they're inside or outside the network, is trusted by default. Every single access request is verified explicitly. It enforces the principle of least privilege, which significantly limits an attacker's ability to move laterally, spread through the network, even if they manage to gain that initial foothold.
That makes perfect sense. Assume the worst, verify everything. Okay, now let's maybe pivot to some of the most common ways these attackers actually get in. What are the main doors they're trying to kick down, and how do we bolt them shut?
Right. A major entry point is exploiting internet-facing vulnerabilities and misconfigurations. Yeah. This is a big one. You should absolutely never expose services like a remote desktop protocol, RDP, directly to the internet without implementing extremely strong compensating controls. Attackers constantly scan for and exploit poorly secured RDP instances to gain that initial access.
So that's like leaving a backdoor unlocked.
Exactly. Organizations must conduct regular vulnerability scanning to identify and address these weaknesses, especially for any device facing the internet. This significantly limits the attack surface. Regularly patching and updating software and operating systems to the latest versions is paramount. This includes prioritizing timely patching of those internet-facing servers. And always disable unnecessary ports and protocols. If it's not being used for a legitimate business purpose, turn it off. If RDP is absolutely necessary, you have to apply best practices. Audit your network for systems using RDP, close any unused RDP ports, enforce multi-factor authentication, MFA, and meticulously log all RDP login attempts. This is all about closing those easy pathways in.
So basically, don't leave your digital front door wide open, and make sure any back doors are incredibly secure, locked down tight.
Okay, what about the human element? Things like stolen passwords, compromised credentials. Yeah, that leads directly to compromised credentials. These are still a very common and highly effective gateway for attackers. Implementing phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication, MFA, for all services is absolutely paramount, especially for email, for VPNs, and for any accounts that access critical systems. Just turn it on everywhere you can.
Is regular MFA enough, or is there something better?
Well, consider employing passwordless MFA solutions. These replace traditional passwords with 2 or more verification factors, like fingerprints, maybe authenticator apps, or cryptographic keys. It just makes it much, much harder for attackers to simply use stolen passwords. Organizations should also think about subscribing to credential monitoring services. These actively scan the dark web, looking for compromised credentials associated with your domain.
Like an early warning system.
Kind of, yeah. And it's also crucial to apply that principle of least privilege to accounts. Never use default admin usernames and passwords. Change them immediately. And don't use root access or domain admin accounts for day-to-day operations. Create specific users for specific tasks. Strong password policies are still important, length, complexity, uniqueness. And crucially, separate administrator accounts from regular user accounts. Designated admin accounts should only be used for administrative purposes, not for high-risk activities like checking emails or browsing the web.
Think of it like separating your work keys from your house keys. You wouldn't use the master key for everything.
Exactly. That's a good analogy.
And speaking of email, phishing is still a massive problem, isn't it? It feels like it never goes away.
Oh, absolutely. Phishing remains one of the most prevalent initial access vectors. It just works too often. Organizations absolutely must implement a robust cybersecurity user awareness and training program. This has to include clear guidance on how to identify and, just as importantly, how to report suspicious activity, particularly phishing attempts. It's about empowering your employees, making them your first line of defense, not your weakest link.
Okay.
Simple things help too. Flagging external emails in email clients helps users distinguish legitimate internal messages from potential external threats. Use filters at your email gateway to block emails with known malicious indicators, like bad links or known malicious attachment types. And enable common attachment filters to restrict file types that commonly contain malware. Regularly review and update this filter list. Attackers are always finding new ways, like those OneNote attachments with embedded malware we saw recently.
Right.
Also, ensure macro scripts are disabled by default for Microsoft Office files transmitted via email. Those macros are a classic way to deliver ransomware payloads.
So good email filters and smarter, trained employees.
Got it. What about malware that might already be lurking inside the system? Maybe from a previous infection just waiting to strike.
Ah, yeah, that's where precursor malware infection comes into play. This is important. Many ransomware infections are actually not the initial compromise. They're the final stage of a deeper, pre-existing malware infection. Malicious actors will often use what we call precursor malware, things like Cockbot or Emotet, maybe Bumblebee, to gain initial access first. Then they establish persistence, maybe they steal data quietly in the background for weeks or months.
Yeah. And then they deploy the ransomware as a destructive final step, partly to make money, but also partly to obscure their earlier activities. So it's vital to use automatic updates for your antivirus and anti-malware software. Make sure it's centrally managed and reporting correctly. Also, utilize application allow listing. This ensures only explicitly authorized software can even run on your systems. And endpoint detection and response, or EDR, solutions on all your assets, your computers and servers. These EDR tools are crucial for detecting and blocking malicious activity right at the endpoints themselves, hopefully long before ransomware can even be deployed.
Okay, so EDR is key for catching things that might slip past the initial defenses. Now, beyond just fake emails, are there more sophisticated ways attackers try to trick people these days? More advanced social engineering?
Yes, definitely. Attackers are increasingly using advanced forms of social engineering. It goes beyond basic phishing emails. Organizations really need to create policies that include cybersecurity awareness training specifically about these advanced social engineering tactics, especially for personnel who have privileged access to the network. This involves teaching people how to recognize things like illegitimate websites that look real, suspicious search engine results, urgent-sounding phone calls asking for credentials, other subtle manipulation attempts. And it's important to repeat this training regularly, maybe quarterly, to keep staff informed and vigilant. These tactics change.
And technically?
Technically, implementing things like protective domain name system or protective DNS services can help. These can block malicious internet activity right at the source, providing enhanced network security, especially useful for remote workers who might not be behind the main corporate firewall.
And finally, the Nucor case really brought this one home, the supply chain risk.
Yeah.
What about the security of third parties and those managed service providers, the MSPs, lots of companies use?
That's a huge point. And yes, a major vulnerability highlighted by the Nucor incident is third parties and managed service providers, the supply chain angle. Your organization's security is truly only as strong as its weakest link. And often, unfortunately, that link is a third-party vendor or an MSP. MSPs in particular have been a significant infection vector for ransomware in recent years, sometimes impacting hundreds of their client organizations simultaneously from one MSP compromise.
Ouch.
Yeah, it's devastating. So it is absolutely crucial to consider and actively assess the risk management and cyber hygiene practices of all third parties or MSPs your organization relies on to meet its mission. If a third party is responsible for maintaining and securing your backups, for instance, you need to ensure they are following all the applicable best practices we've discussed. Don't just assume. Use formal contract language to spell out your security requirements, and ensure you use the principle of least privilege and proper separation of duties when setting up access for third parties. They should only have access to the absolute minimum necessary for their specific role. Verify, don't just trust.
Okay, so that covers a lot of the specific ways attackers get in and how to block those doors. But beyond those specific attack vectors and the preparation strategies like backups and IRPs, what are the broader best practices? The things that serve as the bedrock of a strong, overarching cybersecurity posture for any organization. These sound like the really foundational elements.
Absolutely. These practices really underpin all the more specific mitigations we just talked about, and they are truly vital for building comprehensive cyber resilience over the long term. First, comprehensive asset management is absolutely foundational. You simply cannot protect what you don't know you have. It sounds basic, but it's often overlooked. This means maintaining a meticulous, up-to-date inventory of all your organization's IT assets. That includes both logical assets like your critical data and software applications, and physical assets like servers, laptops, network gear. Crucially, you need to know which data or systems are most vital for your organization's health and safety, or for revenue generation or other essential services, and you need to understand any associated interdependencies between these systems. This detailed understanding will profoundly aid your organization in determining restoration priorities if an incident does occur. It allows you to apply more comprehensive security controls to your most critical assets first, and all this IT asset documentation. It should be stored securely with offline backups and physical hard copies kept on site just in case your digital access is compromised during an attack.
That makes perfect sense. Know what you have, know what's most important, and protect that documentation too.
Exactly. Next, rigorously apply the principle of least privilege across all systems and services. We mentioned it before, but it deserves its own focus. This core security principle dictates that users, accounts, applications, everything should only be granted the absolute minimum access necessary to perform their required function or job. Nothing more. This significantly limits the potential damage if an account is compromised, because malicious actors often leverage overly privileged accounts for network-wide ransomware deployment.
Right, stops them moving around so easily.
Precisely. This includes things like restricting user permissions to install and run software, limiting user or role permissions to access or modify cloud-based resources, and actively removing unnecessary accounts and groups. Regularly audit for excessive privileges. And specifically review those remote monitoring and management RMM accounts, especially any that might be publicly accessible or granted to third-party MSPs.
We hear a lot about protecting servers and endpoints, but what about the underlying infrastructure itself, like the virtual environments, VMware, Hyper-V? Are those also a target these days?
Oh, definitely. Hypervisor and infrastructure hardening is becoming increasingly critical due to emerging threats. This is a key area. Ransomware strategies have begun specifically targeting these virtualized environments, like VMware ESX servers and other centralized management tools. Why? Because compromising the hypervisor allows for fast, widespread encryption of the entire virtual infrastructure at scale. It's incredibly efficient for the attackers.
Wow, okay.
So it is paramount to ensure these core infrastructure components, your hypervisors, your storage controllers, your management interfaces are regularly updated, patched promptly, and hardened according to robust security guidelines from reputable organizations like NIST or the Center for Internet Security, CIS. They are the backbone of your modern data center. Protect them accordingly.
And what about the cloud? So many businesses are moving more and more data and workloads there. Does the cloud change how we need to approach security? Is it inherently safer or just different?
It absolutely changes things, and it's more different than inherently safer. Cloud environment security requires, first, a crystal clear understanding of the shared responsibility model with your cloud provider. You need to know exactly what they secure, like the physical infrastructure, and what you are responsible for securing, like your data configurations, access controls in the cloud.
Okay, so don't assume the provider handles everything.
Definitely not. Beyond that basic understanding, you need to frequently back up your cloud data, preferably offline, or maybe leveraging cloud-to-cloud backup solutions to a separate provider or account. Don't just rely on snapshots within the same account that could be deleted. Enable comprehensive logging on all your cloud resources, and crucially, set up alerts for abnormal usage patterns or suspicious activities. Also, enable features like delete protection or object lock on your cloud storage resources, especially those often targeted in ransomware attacks, like backup storage buckets. This can prevent your critical data from being maliciously deleted or overwritten. And consider enabling version control on storage objects. This keeps multiple variants and can allow for easier recovery from unintended changes or malicious deletions.
What about those legitimate tools that IT teams use all the time for remote management, like RMM software? Can attackers actually turn those legitimate tools against us?
Yes, they absolutely can and frequently do. Organizations need to actively mitigate the malicious use of remote access and remote monitoring and management, RMM software. While these RMM tools are legitimate and often essential for efficient IT management, they are very frequently leveraged by attackers to maintain persistence within a network, execute commands, and deploy malware, including ransomware.
So how do you stop that?
You must audit remote access tools currently deployed on your network. Know what's there. Review RMM logs meticulously for any abnormal use, logins from unusual locations, activity outside business hours, commands being run that don't make sense. Ideally, require authorized RMM solutions to be used only from within your network, perhaps over approved secure remote access solutions like VPNs or virtual desktop interfaces, VDIs, rather than allowing direct internet access to RMM agents. And blocking common RMM ports at the network perimeter is also a crucial preventative step. It's like having a powerful tool, but you make sure only trusted, authorized people can use it under specific conditions.
Right, controlling the tool itself. Okay, you mentioned segmentation earlier, like creating separate departments in a building with fire doors between them. Can you elaborate on that?
That's a great analogy. Network segmentation is a really powerful and strategic defense. It means employing logical or physical means to divide your network into smaller, isolated zones or segments. This is often done by implementing zero-trust architecture principles and separating different business units or departmental IT resources or different levels of data sensitivity. Crucially, you should maintain strict separation between your corporate IT network and any operational technology OT systems, like those controlling industrial processes.
Why is that separation so important?
Because network segmentation can significantly help contain the impact of any intrusion. If one segment is breached, the segmentation acts like those fire doors, preventing or at least limiting the attacker's ability to move laterally into other parts of the network. To make this effective, you need to develop and regularly update comprehensive network diagrams that clearly depict these segments, the security controls between them, and the data flows, including any connections to third parties, MSPs, and cloud services. And, again, securely store this documentation, including offline copies.
Makes sense. What about the scripting languages that Windows uses internally, like PowerShell? Are those a security concern we need to think about?
Yes, absolutely. PowerShell security is an area often exploited by sophisticated attackers. PowerShell is an incredibly powerful scripting language built into Windows, and because it's legitimate and present everywhere, it's frequently abused by attackers to deploy ransomware, move laterally, download additional tools, and hide their malicious activities, so-called living off the land techniques.
So what can you do?
You should restrict its usage to only specific authorized users and systems on a case-by-case basis, perhaps using group policy. Ensure PowerShell is always updated to the latest version, as Microsoft does add security features. Crucially, enable enhanced logging for PowerShell instances. This includes module logging, script block logging, which captures the actual code executed, and transcription logging. You need to retain these logs for a sufficient period, at least 180 days ideally, for forensic analysis if an incident occurs. And regularly check these logs to confirm they haven't been tampered with or that logging hasn't been disabled by an attacker.
Okay, log everything PowerShell does. And then what about the sort of central brain of many Windows networks, the domain controllers? They seem like a prime target. What's special about securing those?
You're right. Securing domain controllers, DCs, is absolutely paramount. Malicious actors very often target DCs, aiming to compromise them because gaining control of a DC often gives them the keys to the entire kingdom, allowing them to push ransomware network-wide very easily. So, to secure your DCs, always use the latest version of Windows Server supported by your organization. Newer versions have better security features. Ensure that DCs are regularly patched for critical vulnerabilities as soon as possible, potentially even faster than your regular patching cycle. Minimize any other software or agents installed directly on DCs. Every extra piece of software is another potential attack surface that could be leveraged to run arbitrary code on that critical system.
Keep them clean.
Exactly. Restrict access to DCs to only designated limited administrator accounts. These should be separate from regular user accounts and only used for DC administrative purposes. Implement privileged access management (PAM) solutions if possible on DCs. These help manage, control, and monitor privileged access, logging and alerting on any unusual activity involving those powerful accounts.
Okay, protect the DCs at all costs. Finally, how do you even know if you've been hit or if something suspicious is happening before the ransomware note pops up? It sounds like you need to be constantly watching, constantly monitoring.
Exactly. That's where log retention and centralized management becomes critical for both detection and later analysis. You need to retain and adequately secure logs from everything: network devices, firewalls, switches, local hosts, servers, workstations, cloud services, critical applications, authentication systems, everything. This comprehensive logging supports robust triage and remediation if something happens, allowing for analysis to determine the full impact of events and ascertain if a minor alert is actually part of a larger incident.
How do you manage all those logs?
Set up centralized log management, ideally using a Security Information and Event Management, or SIEM, tool. This allows your organization to correlate logs from all these different sources: network, host, cloud, apps, providing a holistic view and helping to spot patterns that might indicate an attack. Aim to maintain and securely back up logs for critical systems for a minimum of 1 year, if feasible under regulations and storage constraints. And alongside logging, you should also establish security baselines and conduct regular assessments. Know what normal looks like on your network. Establish a baseline of typical network traffic patterns, user behavior, system processes, and tune your detection systems, like your SIEM, your EDR, to detect significant deviations or anomalous behavior that could indicate a compromise. and conduct regular security assessments, vulnerability scans, penetration tests, configuration reviews to ensure your processes and technical controls are actually effective and up to date. It's a continuous cycle.
Okay, so even with the absolute best preventative measures, all those layers of defense, the strongest foundational security, attacks can still happen. It's a tough reality. So, what do you actually do when a cyber incident is detected, when prevention has failed? This is where that incident response plan truly kicks into high gear, right? And the speed and clarity of your actions become absolutely paramount. What's the very first step when you suspect something?
This is a truly critical moment, yes. And following that predefined, well-practiced incident response plan is absolutely essential for avoiding chaos. CISA provides a clear response checklist, and they emphasize a sequential approach, especially for the first few steps. The very first, most crucial step is to isolate the impacted systems immediately. Determine which systems appear to be affected and take them offline from the network as quickly as possible. This could involve physically unplugging network cables from affected devices, disabling their Wi-Fi adapters, or if several systems or even whole subnets seem impacted, taking that entire network segment offline right at the switch level. Prioritize isolating your most critical systems first, based on that asset inventory we talked about.
So, like containing a fire, stop it from spreading to the whole network infrastructure immediately.
Exactly. Containment is key in those first moments. And during this critical isolation phase, it's absolutely crucial to switch to out-of-band communication methods. Use phones, maybe dedicated emergency radios if you have them, personal cell phones if necessary. Why? Because using your potentially compromised corporate email or chat could tip off the attackers that they've been discovered. That might cause them to panic and accelerate their attack, move laterally faster, or deploy the ransomware more widely before you can fully take networks offline.
Good point. What about powering systems down?
Powering down devices should generally be a last resort, only if you absolutely cannot disconnect them from the network quickly. The reason is that powering down erases valuable forensic evidence stored in the system's volatile memory, RAM. That memory can contain crucial clues about the attack, like encryption keys or attacker command history. Disconnecting from the network is usually preferable if possible. Once systems are isolated, you need to triage them. Identify and prioritize which systems need to be restored first, based on their criticality to your core operations. This again links back to having that predefined critical asset list from your preparation phase.
Okay, so isolate first, use secure comms, triage based on criticality.
Well,
Once you've done that initial containment, how do you figure out the full scope? How do you know what really happened and how far it spread?
Right, the next step is to examine existing organizational detection or prevention systems and their logs. Look at your SIEM, your EDR alerts, firewall logs, authentication logs, everything you have. This detailed examination can highlight evidence of additional systems involved, or perhaps reveal traces of that precursor malware we discussed, like Bumblebee, Emotet, Quackbot. Remember, a ransomware event might actually be the final stage, masking a previous unresolved network compromise.
Ah, so the ransomware might just be the noisy part covering up earlier data theft.
It absolutely could be.
Yeah.
Operators of these advanced malware droppers often sell access to compromised networks to ransomware groups, or the ransomware itself is deployed specifically to destroy logs and obscure those previous post-compromise activities, like business email compromise or extensive data exfiltration. So care must be taken to identify and eradicate any such dropper malware before you start rebuilding systems from backups. Otherwise, you might just get reinfected immediately. After this initial technical examination, you need to confer with your incident response team, internal and external experts, to develop and document an initial understanding of what has occurred based on the evidence found so far.
Okay, so it's not just about what you see on the surface with the ransomware itself. You really have to hunt for those deeper, potentially earlier infections. What does that threat hunting actually involve? What are you looking for?
That's when you formally initiate threat hunting activities across your entire environment, or at least the potentially impacted segments. This is a proactive search, not just waiting for alerts. For enterprise networks, this involves actively searching for things like newly created user accounts, especially administrator accounts, or existing accounts that suddenly have escalated privileges. Look for recent activity related to known privileged accounts that seems unusual. Check for anomalous VPN logins, maybe from strange geographic locations or at odd times, or multiple failed logins followed by a success, or other suspicious login patterns to any system. Check endpoint systems for modifications that might have been made by the attacker to impair your defenses or recovery options, things like disabling antivirus, deleting backups or shadow copies, stopping disk journaling services. Attackers often try to disable these first, Be on the lookout for signs of malicious tools being downloaded or run, or any unexpected usage of legitimate remote monitoring and management (RMM) software that we talked about earlier. Any unexpected PowerShell execution, especially encoded or obfuscated scripts, or the use of administrative toolkits like PSExec or Mimikatz, should raise immediate red flags. And crucially, look for potential signs that sensitive data was enumerated, staged, and then exfiltrated from the network before the encryption started. This might include finding archiving tools like WinRAR or 7-zip installed where they shouldn't be, seeing abnormal amounts of data flowing outbound over any port, especially unusual ones like DNS, or detecting the use of common tools specifically designed for data exfiltration, like rclone, or uploads to various web-based file storage services.
So you're looking for the breadcrumbs they might have left behind during the earlier stages.
Exactly. And for cloud environments specifically, you should ideally have tools enabled to automatically detect and perhaps even prevent unauthorized modifications to critical security settings, like identity and access management (IAM) roles, network security group rules, or data protection configurations like disabling MFA or encryption.
Okay, so once you've detected the incident, analyzed the situation, isolated things, and you have that initial understanding, who do you absolutely need to tell, and how do you manage that communication effectively, especially under pressure?
All right, this moves us squarely into the coordination and notification phase, which is absolutely critical for managing the crisis effectively and meeting legal obligations. First, you must immediately engage your internal and external teams and stakeholders exactly as outlined in your predefined cyber incident response and communications plan. Don't improvise here if you can help it. This typically includes your internal IT department, your managed security service provider, MSSP, if you use one, your cyber insurance company, they often have specific requirements and resources, legal counsel, and key internal leadership. Share the information you have gathered promptly and clearly to receive timely and relevant assistance. Keep management and senior leaders informed via regular structured updates as the situation develops. Don't leave them guessing. Simultaneously, it is imperative to report the incident to law enforcement. In the U.S., this generally means notifying CISA. They have an online reporting portal. Your local FBI field office, they handle major cybercrime investigations. The FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center, IC3, or your local U.S. Secret Service field office. They also investigate financial cybercrime. They can provide resources, potentially help with decryption, and pursue the criminals.
And what if personal data was involved? Like customer information, employee records? What are the responsibilities there? That seems like a legal minefield.
It can be. If the incident resulted in a confirmed data breach, meaning personal or sensitive information was potentially accessed or stolen, you absolutely must follow all applicable data breach notification requirements. These are outlined in your cyber incident response and communications plans, but they stem from laws. This means adhering to applicable state laws, and almost every state now has its own breach notification law with different triggers, timelines, and content requirements. You also need to understand any relevant federal notification requirements, for example, under HIPAA if healthcare information was involved, or Gramm-Leach-Bliley for financial institutions. For breaches involving personally identifiable information, PII, you generally must notify the affected individuals directly so they can take steps to protect themselves, like monitoring their accounts or placing fraud alerts. If Social Security numbers were stolen, you should contact the major credit bureaus, Experian, Equifax, TransUnion, for advice, and definitely advise affected individuals to request fraud alerts or credit freezes on their reports.
How do you actually communicate with those affected individuals effectively without causing unnecessary panic or maybe inadvertently giving future attackers more information?
That's a delicate balance. When communicating with affected individuals, it's wise to consult with law enforcement first about the timing of the notification. Sometimes they might ask for a brief delay if immediate public notification could impede their ongoing investigation. Designate a clear point person or team within your organization responsible for releasing information consistently. Consider using multiple communication channels to reach people: formal letters, a dedicated page on your website with FAQs, maybe a toll-free number for questions. If you don't have direct contact information for everyone potentially affected, which can happen, you might need to work with your PR team to build a broader public relations campaign, including press releases to media outlets.
And what should that communication actually say?
In your communication, be as clear and transparent as possible about what you know regarding the compromise. How did it happen? Briefly. What types of information were potentially taken? What specific actions has your company taken to remedy the situation and enhance security? And, very importantly, what specific actions can they, the affected individuals, take to protect themselves? Advise them to visit official resources like identitytheft.gov for comprehensive recovery steps. You might also need to consider offering at least a year of free credit monitoring services as a gesture of goodwill and practical help. And crucially, tell people exactly how you will contact them in the future. For example, we will only contact you by official letter, to help them avoid falling victim to follow-up phishing scams that often prey on breach victims.
Okay, that makes sense. So once you've managed the initial shock, contained the immediate spread, and handled the critical communications, how do you actually stop the attack fully in its tracks and eradicate the threat completely from your systems? This sounds like the real cleanup phase.
Exactly. This is the critical containment and eradication phase. This is where you actively work to stop any ongoing attack activity, prevent further damage, and systematically remove the threat actor's access and persistence mechanisms from your environment. Now, if no initial mitigation actions seem possible immediately, maybe the ransomware is spreading too fast, or you're unsure of the scope, the absolute priority shifts slightly to preserve evidence for later investigation. Take a forensic system image, a bit-by-bit copy, and a memory capture, a snapshot of RAM, of at least a sample of the affected devices. Collect all relevant logs you can safely access, as well as samples of any identified ransomware binaries or precursor malware. This evidence is crucial for understanding the attack and potentially for law enforcement. Even if mitigation actions are possible, always consult federal law enforcement regarding possible decryptors before you consider paying any ransom. Sometimes security researchers discover flaws in the ransomware's encryption and release free decryption tools for certain variants. Law enforcement often has the latest intelligence on this.
Okay, preserve evidence, check for decryptors. Then how do you physically get the attackers out of your network and stop the bleeding?
To continue active containment and mitigation, first, research trusted guidance for the specific ransomware variant you're dealing with, if you can identify it. Different families have different behaviors and sometimes known weaknesses or specific removal steps. CISA and reputable security firms often publish analyses. Follow any additional recommended steps from those trusted sources. Then, kill or disable the execution of known ransomware binaries on affected systems and delete other known associated malicious files or scheduled tasks. This helps minimize further damage and impact to your systems. Critically, you must identify the systems and accounts involved in the initial breach. Where did they first get in? Which accounts did they compromise? This often involves tracing back through logs, looking for the patient zero system or the first phished email account. Based on these initial breach details, you need to contain associated systems that may be used for further or continued unauthorized access. If the attacker stole credentials, simply cleaning the ransomware isn't enough. Breaches often involve mass credentialed exfiltration. So, securing your network from continued credential-based unauthorized access might require temporarily disabling VPNs, remote access servers, single sign-on resources, or other public-facing assets until you're sure all compromised accounts are reset and secured.
So you have to assume they might still have keys even after you kick them out.
You have to assume that, yes. If server-side data is actively being encrypted, like on file shares, you need to quickly identify the user account or system process that's accessing and encrypting those files. You can sometimes do this by reviewing active server sessions, looking at open file handles on the server, examine file properties of encrypted files or the ransom notes themselves. Sometimes they contain clues about the specific user account used. Review RDP event logs, Windows security logs, especially logon events 462.44625, and SMB access logs for significant authentication or file access events around the time the encryption started.
Oh, okay. So a really deep dive into the forensics to find every last trace and lock every potential door they used.
Yes, exactly. Finally, within this phase, you also need to conduct extended analysis to identify persistence mechanisms. Attackers don't just want initial access. They often set up backdoors to regain access later if they get kicked out. You need to hunt for these. This involves looking for both outside-in persistence, like rogue external accounts they created, backdoors installed on perimeter systems like firewalls or VPN concentrators, and inside-out persistence, like malware implants set to call home, scheduled tasks, launching malicious scripts, or abuse of legitimate tools like PowerShell scripts set to run periodically. This often involves deploying EDR solutions if you didn't have them already, thoroughly auditing all local and domain accounts, especially privileged ones, and conducting deep forensic analysis across affected systems to map out the attacker's movement and uncover any hidden footholds. Only once the environment has been thoroughly cleaned, potentially rebuilt, and all identified malicious persistence mechanisms have been removed, should you proceed with broader recovery actions like mass password resets for all users and service accounts, and addressing the underlying vulnerabilities that allowed the breach in the first place. At some point, the designated IT or IT security authority within your organization needs to formally declare the ransomware incident contained and eradicated based on established criteria in your plan.
Okay. And after all that incredibly intensive work to contain the threat, eradicate it, find all the persistence, how do you actually get back to normal operations? And maybe more importantly, what do you do after the immediate crisis to prevent it from happening all over again?
Right. That brings us to the final crucial phase, recovery and post-incident activity. This isn't just about getting the lights back on. It's equally crucial for long-term resilience and making sure you learn from the experience to continuously improve your defenses. First, the core of recovery is, of course, to reconnect systems and restore data from backups. But this needs to be done carefully and methodically based on that prioritization of critical services you established during triage. You absolutely must use your clean, offline, encrypted backups. And it is paramount to take extreme care not to reinfect your clean, rebuilt systems during this recovery process.
How can that happen? How do you avoid reinfection during recovery?
Well, for example, if you set up a new isolated network segment, specifically for rebuilding critical servers, a clean room environment, you must ensure only verified clean systems and data are introduced into it. Don't connect potentially compromised restoration tools or unrestored systems directly to your clean recovery network. Scan restored data for any dormant malware before making it live. It requires meticulous attention to detail. Use fresh credentials for everything being rebuilt.
Okay, so basically a super careful, staged rebuild from a known good state, verifying everything along the way.
Precisely. After the technical recovery is underway or complete, you must ensure post-recovery security. This isn't optional. This includes immediately issuing password resets for all affected systems and user accounts, even those you think were directly compromised. Assume broad credential exposure. You also must address any associated vulnerabilities and gaps in security controls or visibility that were identified during the incident investigation. Don't just restore, harden. This could involve applying missing patches that the attackers exploited, upgrading software to more secure versions, reconfiguring firewall rules, improving logging, or maybe updating customer-managed encryption keys if those were potentially compromised. Finally, and vitally for your organization's future security posture and the broader community, you must learn and share. Conduct a thorough post-incident review or lessons learned session. Document everything. What went well in the response, what didn't, what gaps were identified, what forensic findings were significant.
Well, and what do you do with those lessons?
This comprehensive documentation should then be used to inform specific updates to and refine your organizational policies, your incident response plan, your communication plans, and your technical procedures. Use it to guide future tabletop exercises and training for your incident response team. Make the pain worthwhile by getting better. Additionally, strongly consider sharing relevant, anonymized lessons learned and technical indicators of compromise, IOCs, like malicious IP addresses, file hashes, TAC-TTPs with CISA, or your sector-specific Information Sharing and Analysis Center. It says ISEC. This collaborative approach helps the entire community enhance their collective cybersecurity defenses against these constantly evolving threats.
Wow. Okay, that was a lot to process, but it's incredibly vital information for anyone navigating today's digital landscape, whether you're running a business or just trying to stay safe online. For you, our listener, tuning in today, what are the biggest, most actionable takeaways from this deep dive into the world of ransomware and cybersecurity? What should people really walk away remembering?
Yeah, it is a lot, but it's so important. If we connect this all back to the bigger picture, here are what I see as the core insights you should really carry with you. Whether you're managing a large enterprise network or just trying to secure your personal digital life. First, remember that cybersecurity is a continuous journey, not a destination. It's not a project you complete once and then check off a list. It's truly an ongoing, iterative process. It involves constantly identifying new risks as they emerge, actively protecting your assets, diligently detecting threats, responding effectively when incidents occur, and recovering efficiently afterwards. Threats are always evolving, and so too must your defenses. This means a fundamental commitment to regular assessments, continuous monitoring, and constantly adapting your strategies. It never really stops.
Okay, constant vigilance. What's next?
Second, and perhaps the most practically important point, preparation is your strongest shield. Having robust, tested offline and encrypted backups of your critical data is absolutely non-negotiable. They are your ultimate fallback, the thing that ensures you can restore operations even if your primary systems are completely compromised or destroyed by ransomware. Equally crucial is having a well-defined and critically regularly practiced incident response plan. Knowing exactly what to do, who to contact, and how to communicate during the chaos of an attack will significantly reduce the impact, minimize downtime, and speed up your recovery immeasurably. These two elements, comprehensive backups and a tested response plan, are your fundamental safety net. Don't skip on them.
Backups and a plan. Got it. What else?
Third, really internalize it. Your weakest link matters, especially in the supply chain. The Nucor incident starkly highlights this critical role of third-party risk. As organizations become increasingly interconnected with vendors, cloud providers, and managed service providers, a vulnerability or compromise in a single partner can become a direct and devastating entry point for attackers right into your network. You absolutely must understand and actively manage the cyber hygiene and security practices of all your critical third-party partners. Things like formalized contractual security requirements, regular security audits, and enforcing least privilege for vendor access are essential to mitigate this significantly extended risk across your entire digital supply chain.
Makes sense. You're only as strong as your partner's security, too.
Exactly. Fourth, embrace the idea that zero trust is the future of network security. You need to move away from the outdated, castle and moat, perimeter-based security model where everything inside is trusted. Instead, assume that your network is already compromised or potentially hostile at all times. Build your defenses accordingly with granular access controls for everyone and everything. Verify every user, every device, and every access request explicitly every time, and grant only the absolute minimum necessary privileges required for the task at hand. This zero-trust approach significantly limits an attacker's ability to move laterally and cause widespread damage, even if they manage to gain that initial foothold somewhere.
Assume breach. Verify everything. Okay, last one.
Finally, understand that information sharing empowers everyone. Collaborating actively with government agencies like CISA and with your sector-specific groups, like Information Sharing and Analysis Centers, ISACs, provides truly invaluable threat intelligence, up-to-date best practices, and access to critical resources. CISA, for instance, offers numerous no-cost resources to help organizations enhance their defenses. Everything from vulnerability scanning services to incident response assistance and tabletop exercises, and sharing your own lessons learned and indicators of compromise when possible helps the entire community become more resilient against these evolving, sophisticated threats. We're stronger together on this.
Those are really clear, powerful takeaways. So thinking about all that, what does this really mean for you, the listener, as you move forward trying to apply these insights in your own context?
Yeah, this raises, I think, a really important question for everyone to consider. In a world of ever-increasing interconnectedness, where the lines between traditional information technology, IT, and the operational technology, OT, that controls physical processes are blurring more and more, how will organizations truly adapt their internal culture? How do we make cybersecurity not just an IT department's job relegated to the server room, but a fundamental business imperative? Something that's woven into the fabric of every single decision, from the highest levels of executive strategy right down to the daily operations on the factory floor or in the office. It really has to become part of everyone's thinking. It's about a complete cultural shift towards resilience.
That's a powerful thought to leave you with, absolutely. And it truly emphasizes the continuous nature of this challenge, but also the ongoing opportunity we all have to build resilience. We really hope this deep dive has provided you with valuable insights and some actionable knowledge to better understand and navigate the complex, sometimes scary world of cybersecurity. Thank you so much for joining us.
And remember, the journey to becoming well-informed and well-protected is a continuous one, and hopefully we can help guide you through it.
This deep dive was sponsored by Stonefly. They are a leader in enterprise storage, backup, and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions. For secure, ransomware-proof storage, Stonefly offers air-gapped and immutable solutions, exactly the kind of robust backup protection we talked about today. You can learn more and schedule a demo by contacting them directly at sales@stonefly.com. Join us next time for another deep dive into the topics that matter most to you.